Naomi, welcome to the Always Better Than Yesterday podcast. It's so good to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
I would love to know a little bit more about you and your story, if you'd be willing to share.
My story. Okay. So right now where I am, I have three kids, Susanna, Judah and Lois. So they are obviously my priority. I'm primary care for them, single parent, which is an adventure for the last year. And I am a Christian, growing up in the church all my life. I would say my faith has gone from formulaic taught to raw and much more authentic in the last 4 years. But lockdown, as you'll know, in these few short months we've known each other, has been a massive roller coaster of really learning the difference between religion and faith on a very raw level. So I found myself propelled into all kinds of environments that I didn't ever expect to be in, which has been amazing. And yeah, learning really to, I think, empty myself more than anything, to make room in relationships, in my work, in my home, for things to happen, and not be prescriptive in the things that I do, which is a challenge for somebody who likes to control everything. So I'm learning to let go, I think, more than anything else, which has been an interesting journey.
I hear you on that one. I hear you. That's very much been my journey over the last 12 months. Surrender is not my favorite word. So I'd love to dive in, because you haven't mentioned MITOS yet. I'd love to know a little bit about MITOS, but I want to know some of the backstory. I want to know where you've come from. I want to know some of the things that have shaped and guided your heart and mind for MITOS up until this point.
Sure. So MITOS is, I can't call it a company because it's not a company. It's still settling what it really is, but I would call it at the moment, it's like a canopy or an umbrella brand or organization, which I very softly launched in January. I am trained as an emotion coach and practitioner trainer, and have been doing all sorts of things on some level or another around helping people and supporting people all the way through my career, whether it's nannying or whether it's I've worked for the youth offending team, working with young offenders, or actually doing emotion coaching with kids in schools. So sort of on a kind of career side of things, I've always been involved in that sort of thing. But I think the biggest kind of shift for me in the last 4 years has been around forgiveness, actually, and learning how to love well, how to be boundaried, how to forgive myself for things, and how to be less hooked by other people. And I've been learning a lot anyway, but obviously even more in the last few months, about fear and what fear is and what fear isn't. And MITOS stands for moving in the opposite spirit. I'm going to take a moment to credit my dad. I sort of sat wondering, trying to settle on what am I going to call my business, and he'd been carrying that word around for quite a while, that acronym, and he felt actually he wanted to give it to me, and it just fitted so well. And I was actually with them over Christmas, beginning to work on branding and settling how I wanted this to look, and knew I needed a certain kind of bit of a tagline. And I sat for ages with my dad, and we just sort of doing all these different words, and the two words that kept coming through were connect and transform. But actually a lot of that comes from learning, whether it's learning by actively learning or learning by being taught. So the tagline is learn, connect, transform, and the idea is to gain wisdom and knowledge and understanding about the way our brains work. Neuroscience is a big part of what I teach, and actually the whole point is to connect with ourselves, with God, with one another, to bring about change. And the moving in the opposite spirit, and I sort of really was brainstorming and writing out what that really means, and really that spirit is fear, anything that comes against us being our true selves. And as you'll know, Einstein said something, I always say this wrong, but it's great spirits often encounter violent opposition from mediocre minds. And opposition is about telling you what you can't do rather than calling you higher. And so So that's what we're opposing. That's what, and I say we because it's growing. There's some new people that are coming on board that I'm beginning to collaborate with, and some of the piece of work we've already done are under the MITOS umbrella. So even though if you look at the website, I'm on there, really that's going to grow, and it's creating a space for different people to come in and out and collaborate and have a sort of what will hopefully become a familiar brand under which to work for voices to be heard.
I want to touch on the neuroscience element of it because I'm fascinated by this. And before I became a Christian, I was a man of science. I say that in inverted brackets. I was a man of science, and I just would be curious to know how you align both your faith and your understanding of science.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think God is really loves science. I think he created science. I don't think it's either or. Mm-hmm. And actually, when I look at the way the brain works and how particularly the emotions, obviously being an emotion coach and everything I do is based on feelings, recognizing that the emotional part, the emotional core of the brain is already fully active before we're born. Mm-hmm. And fully developed by the age of 11 and earlier in neurodiverse children. It just makes no sense to me that we push down our emotions in order to make decisions. That's actually more irrational. And then just learning, I mean, neuroscience is something that I'm fairly new to, even though I've been doing emotion coaching mm-hmm. on and off for 6 years. It's only since I did my practitioner trainer last year I've really started to get a grasp on this. I'm still learning and I love it. But, just the way our whole systems are connected and how we feel physically in our body, what's going on emotionally. And we think of emotions being in the heart, but they come from the brain. And it's all so fascinating, so complex. And when I think of God he is so creative and so loves seeing us discover. And so as we find joy, when I'm sat reading an article on the development trajectories in neurotypical children of the amygdala and the hippocampus, I actually read that last week, and I'm going, oh my goodness, look at this and look at this. And I'm showing my friend who's got 2 children with autism. And I'm like, this is why sensory issues became such a big deal about this age. And I think God actually loves how we take joy in discovery and how we take joy in learning. But also the thing that causes me to know or to feel deep down in my own core that there is something so much bigger than science is those instincts. You can't put any kind of formula to those gut feelings that when you sense that something's going to happen, or when you feel like you should do something, even if it's counterintuitive, it doesn't make sense in the natural. If I look at my story and my history and the journey I've been on, the very fact that I am doing what I'm doing with the people that I'm doing it with, that my kids are thriving, makes no sense. Mm-hmm. And people say to me, oh, you're so strong. Yes, I am. But my strength is in choosing to surrender, is in choosing to make room, is in choosing to forgive. Forgiveness has actually been, I was sort of reflecting on it this morning ahead of us talking this afternoon. If I had to pick one of the things I've repeatedly shown up and chosen to do that has shaped everything, it's forgiveness. 100%.
Why?
Because there's 2 elements to it. So number one is it keeps you in a place of surrender. So I remember 4 years ago, there was something that had happened, and I had decided I wasn't going to forgive that particular thing. It's not like me. And I kind of tucked that away in my back pocket as a bit of keep that forever. That's going to be the thing I come back to. That's my safety net. And I think we do that a lot subconsciously. And I was sat in a, I don't know, kind of a young adults meeting. We've been learning together. We've been reading Isaiah 52, 53, which is where all the prophetic stuff is around Jesus coming and dying on the cross. And somebody read an account of the physical impact of going to the cross on Jesus. And it was horrific. I mean, it was absolutely horrific. Everything from what it would have done to him, having the crown of thorns in his head, what actually has to happen in the system to sweat blood, right through to the chest cavity literally filling with fluid and crushing its heart. And I mean, I wanted to bolt. I mean, I really wanted to run with everything in me. I felt so sick. And it was only fear of man that stopped me doing that, actually. And I sat, and we were told, we would listen, go and sit with that and just settle what that means for you. And I realized that, I called myself a Christian my whole life. I've grown up in the church. But by refusing to forgive, I was essentially saying what Jesus did wasn't good enough for me. I was holding it in contempt. And that made me feel really sick. And so that was it. From then on, forgiveness is just not something I'm prepared to have in my life. And so it keeps you in that place of surrender and recognizing how Jesus has already done everything we ever need to overcome everything we face. But also it stops you hanging on to other people's stuff. And interestingly, a few weeks ago, I had a Zoom chat with somebody who I sort of know peripherally, but who knows the family of my the kid's dad. They know him well, and he didn't know the story of where things are at, that we're separated, and all the whys. And so I had to tell him a little bit about what was going on and what had led to it. And I was almost expecting to have to defend myself. And he just said, "I'm so overcome by how much grace you have." I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "You're not bitter. You're not angry. There's no resentment in your tone." And I'm like, "Well, no, I'm not bitter or angry or resentful. If I walked around with a sense of being owed something, then I'm never going to be satisfied. I'm never going to be happy in my own heart." And so I think that's why forgiveness is so important, because it's letting go, but also forgiving self. I wasn't innocent in the breakdown of my marriage. I've messed up time and time again with my kids. Of course I have. But actually, the best thing I have been able to do for them is to model self-forgiveness, to let things go, to not feel awful about things, to put it right, of course, to apologize, of course, to make good. And so I think if you took forgiveness out of my journey, I would not be sitting here today. I would not be functioning. I would be walking around feeling like the world owed me something, and carrying around, taking responsibility for other people's anger, other people's messes. And so, yeah, I'm just not prepared to do that.
You talked about discovering the difference between religion and faith. Why is that a thing?
Because religion is, I feel, about rules, about striving. And it's also about being subject to other people's opinions a lot of the time. Now, that's not to say we don't need accountability. We do. Being covered, being accountable is absolutely right. But I used to feel like in order to get there, whatever that means, in order to find my place with God, I needed to be up at 6 o'clock in the morning and doing the quiet times and reading my Bible. And I didn't find life in that. I would feel just like I was never getting it right. I was never going to make it. And I think whereas faith is much more, it's an unction, it's a knowledge that comes from relationship. That has to come first. And if you get hung up on the rules or the I don't know, you get people have different ideas and different things over so many issues, and the issue becomes the issue instead of the heart being the issue. And I think Romans 14 is so absolutely about not judging. And I used to be really properly judgy all the time of everyone and everything, and letting go of that has been such a relief. And so I think it's recognizing. I think people say, don't they, when people die, or you never know what happens between a man and his maker in those last moments. But actually, my dad once said, well, you never know what happens between a man and his maker anyway. So we walk around deciding whether they're a good Christian, whether they really know God. We don't have a clue. It's none of our business. We're called to encourage one another and to put each other up and to be rooted and established. And the rooted and established in love in God has to come first. And if we're not that, then we don't get to even begin, in my view, to question other people's.
I know you really enjoyed my interview with John Gordon back in episode 77, and in it he described what he talks about in the garden around work coming from the word worship, and the two were never really supposed to be separated. And I just wonder, how does how does the word of God, how does the way of Jesus show up in MITOS?
Oh, that's easy. Jesus saw. He saw the person. So if you look all the way through his life, so the woman at the well, he spoke to her heart before he talked about what she did. Zacchaeus in the tree, he didn't say, what do you think you're doing? You need to pay back everyone's taxes, get a grip, and then we might be able to have a relationship. He's like, hey, come on down. He saw him. There's a stunning story of a widow whose son has just died, and in that culture would have left her with nothing. And it says Jesus was overcome with compassion, and he saw her. He saw what she needed. And so MITOS is about being seen, about seeing where somebody is at, and actually bringing a voice and a language to them to be able to identify with that. And that's what we all long for, is to actually be seen. But yet it's vulnerable to put ourselves out there. And for a lot of people, myself included, we put ourselves out there and we're not seen, or we're misunderstood. That was my biggest fear, was being misunderstood.
Yeah.
But actually, and so, when going into an environment where there is animosity, I always think, my heart is always to what's really going on for this person. What are they displaying? They're displaying anger. So what do they need? They need peace. So where have they lacked peace? I can see that you're really unsettled right now. I'm so sorry that things are hard for you. What do you need? And that totally, changes the atmosphere. And I remember even I was at a gathering not long before lockdown, and I was chatting to this guy, and he told me that his wife had died 2 years ago. And I turned around and said, I'm so sorry, what was her name? And he was really shocked.
Yeah.
What was she like? What do you miss about her?
Mm.
And, and he just so valued the opportunity to talk about someone that was really precious to him. Yep. And so that's that's what it is about Jesus that I love, is that he saw and he called and he met that person in their pain.
Yeah. What do you think stops people from doing that?
What, for other people or for themselves?
Yeah, like having that conversation with that man and being able to ask him those questions about his wife. What do you think stops people doing that?
Fear, always.
Yeah.
What if I upset them? What if I get it wrong? What if it feels awkward? What if he, thinks I'm weird? What if he doesn't? What if he feels seen? What if he feels validated? What if he feels, just really grateful that somebody stopped to ask? Yeah. And so, I've said, that Erwin McManus says fear is faith in the worst possible outcome. So what is the opposite of fear? Love is the only thing. Fear and love can't coexist. And so the only way to bring someone out of fear is to invite them into love. And so that's seeing them, saying, I see you. And, certainly with when I'm working with adults who've had pain in their childhood, that's one of the things I say is, I'm so sorry you weren't seen. I'm sorry that no one met your need in that moment. And it's usually very moving, because that's what we all need.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. I think some of those, I can visualize this in a leadership capacity, because I've been a leader of predominantly women for a long time, who are naturally more emotional or willing to display emotion, shall we say, than men in a work setting. And there's a varying difference between line managers who can deal with that emotion and who can't. And I think sometimes the fact that there are certain people that can't deal with that themselves, and therefore they can't deal with it for others. They can't give what they've not got. And sometimes that's an understanding and a comfort to be around emotion. If someone came to you and were looking to, because I think to be able to lead other people, we need to be first able to lead ourselves. So how do we learn, through the work that you do with MITOS, through the emotion coaching, how would you work with someone to gain a greater emotional understanding of themselves?
Storytelling is the main thing. I actually started with a new client yesterday, who's first we met through a color profiling workshop that we're both on, and he, when I told him what I did, his response was, "I don't do emotion." Okay, that's interesting. very sweet guy,
Yeah.
very empathic,
Yes.
very good at considering the needs of others, but really struggles with needing other people. And we actually had our first session yesterday. And I said to him, how do you want to start? Do you want me to talk through the basic neuroscience, how it all works together, or do you want to just dive in? He said, let's just dive in. And he's telling me these stories of growing up, different things that he's done, different things he's experienced. Yep. And I'm just going, okay, well, how does that feel? And he's like, I don't feel anything. And then we had this really interesting moment where he went through something very traumatic that for most people would have shut them down. And I said, what happened for you in that moment? He said, well, actually, strangely, he sat by the side of the road with his family looking at a car that they should not have got out of. Mm-hmm. He said, oh, actually, I remembered this scene from this movie. And I just kept thinking about that scene from this movie. And I said, do you know why that was? And he said, no. And I said, well, it was likely because for you, that's a safe place. That's a place of joy. So your brain is finding its own way to bring comfort. So that tells me that actually what you were feeling was, there was a bit of fear knocking around, sadness, confusion. So you defaulted to find a safe space. So, oh, that's interesting. And then so just validating what was going on, even though he couldn't identify it, he then went on to tell me about his experience between the age of 17 and 21, which was an extremely difficult time. And what I was able to help him see is that he was working in one place, going home at the weekend. This place was very high end. This was very struggling to even pay for shopping. Mm-hmm. So the assumption here was that he was loaded in part of this, and the assumption here was that he wasn't. And so in neither place was he seen for who he really was. And that was when his shutdown began. And it was so interesting because, we talked about a lot of things. And then later on, he messages me and begins to say, because there's something coming up in this weekend, he's like, this is going on this weekend. And I'm feeling, and he named about 9 different emotions in one message. And I'm like, this is amazing. And so actually telling our stories brings validation. If somebody hears it, it brings validation. And so starting off, I could have started off with something very professional, very, something that can seem very emotionally detached. But actually, as soon as you begin to name what's going on in there, that part of you almost begins to wake up, and it's giving people permission. And it's interesting because actually through lockdown, I've ended up doing more one-to-ones with men than I have with women. And so there is a hunger there, but it's having a safe way to develop that language without feeling like, without losing face, as it were. And then I find that as they go there, they don't begin to care less anyway about what other people think. But it's really interesting. The storytelling. And Jesus told stories, didn't he? All the time.
He did tell stories. Do you have a favourite one?
That Jesus told? No. Not really.
I would love to know your story of transformation through lockdown.
Oh, okay. So lockdown hit. I went a little bit loopy. For me and my children, it felt the same as when their dad first left. So they are all these huge feelings, and I am trying to navigate 4 hearts. So I did what I'm really good at. I got very, 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 very busy. So I signed up to every networking event, every possible one-to-one, said yes to every invitation, made lots of invitations. So I became very unavailable. And that didn't really work very well. There was one particular day where I flipped to either implode or explode. I exploded. My family suffered a little bit. They're very gracious, my extended family. And I think, as you'll remember, I had spent months actually avoiding God. I was so afraid that if I let him close, if I began to go with the next level of healing, that he was going to make me get out and start doing what I had known for a long time I was supposed to do. So I'd set MITOS up, done the website, got emails set up, and then done absolutely nothing with it. And I think definitely, so a number of things have happened simultaneously. I keep saying near the beginning of lockdown, but lockdown was so long, I've lost track.
Yeah. It's all merged.
It's all merged. But I would say a number of things happened. Number one, I started connecting with God again.
Yep.
I did a little challenge with a guy called Graham Cook on Facebook, which was called 3+Me. So that's about God, the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. And that was really helpful because he talked about how Jesus is inside of us and his relationship with God is never broken, which means our relationship with God is never broken. He spends so much time going, I need to get back into a relationship with God. And so knocking that out was brilliant. And he was just saying, we've got everything we need inside of us. It's just like walking into an elevator and hitting the peace button and calling up peace. So I'm like, oh, okay, brilliant. So that, and one of the things he talked about is about every low place in our life having a double portion of blessing as we surrender to the love of God and those seasons of our life. And I've had a lot of lows, a lot. And so I'm like, oh, okay, that means there's good stuff coming. Okay. And I just began to go there with just stopping and giving time to listening to God and what he had to say to me. I journal. I mean, I've written hundreds of pages in lockdown in my journal, which is kind of two-way conversation, and then began these downloads of kind of just boom realizations of, you know, beginning with what it is to be on the water. So, you know, that Jesus walked out into the storm to get to his friends, and then Peter jumps out of the boat and he starts to sink, and this is where I'm, you know, getting back to faith versus religion. I've always grown up thinking that's about me not having enough faith, but it isn't. It's Jesus saying, hey, I'm here, it's fine, I've got you. When we're on the water, we get to rise with the waves and see where he's taking us. And that was kind of the beginning, and I've sort of gone on this journey of actually being fully seen. Jesus said, I loved you because I knew you, and we know Jesus knows everything about us, but actually, am I prepared to let him see it all? Am I prepared to let go of everything and be, you know, a joke with some friends about being naked before him. And actually, it says in the Bible, he's our strength and high tower. So the more seen we are by him, the more naked we are, the more everything's out there. Okay, you can literally have it all. I don't care anymore. The more two things happen. One is we get to reflect him more. We're made in his image. So that means I'm part of him and he's part of me, and he's love, and so I'm love. So actually I'm quite amazing, not in an arrogant way, and I get to reflect God. How cool is that? So there's an inner work that happens, but also the more out there and exposed we are, the more he can completely surround us and hold us steady. So when those waves come, he takes the brunt of that. So even though, you know, it said to be in the world, not of the world, which is really confusing if nobody explains what that means. Actually, it means the more we're covered by him, the less we're exposed to those that aren't safe. So it's almost like I've had conversations with people, and I've been in environments where I would anticipate, a bit like with that guy, I'd anticipate being shut down or being questioned, but it hasn't even, you know, so it's not even been an issue at all. So that's been sort of, I mean, there's so much has gone on in lockdown. It's almost like too much to believe, but I've been writing a lot. I have profound new connections, amazing friends, amazing voices like you and other people in the Abti group, just calling each other higher. And it's so, I feel seen. And that's what it's about. I feel really seen. And even yesterday I had a bit of a pain point, but I was triggered by something, and this friend who's very new, like in the last 3 weeks, and I'm just messaging her going, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling this. And she's like, I see you, I'm feeling that with you, I'm so sorry, you know, let's talk this out, let me pray for you. And it was like, by the time I went to bed, instead of it eating me up inside, it was like, okay, I've been seen now, I can let that go. I don't have to carry that around anymore. It's so powerful.
So this sense of surrender and stepping out onto the water, what has that done for your journey with MITOS?
Well, it's taken it from an inactive brand to it's literally like God has gone, brilliant, now I can really use you. And just some amazing projects are coming out of it. So there's sort of lots of smaller things going on. You won't know this, but I spoke to the 3 schools that I'm involved with yesterday, and all 3 of them want me to go in now and start upskilling staff instead of just working with kids. That's amazing. And you know, there's a project, I don't know when this is going out, so I have to be a bit careful, but there's a, I got invited to this guy. I think what I felt, that's the other thing, is I felt challenged to write an article to put out on LinkedIn about the fallout of bringing everybody back together after lockdown, the melting pot of emotions that are going to be in that space. We can pick up on each other's feelings. That's been scientifically proven, as well as just knowing it. And so actually even just naming what's going on in the room can be really helpful. So I wrote this article, and what I felt God was saying to me was, make yourself visible enough to be found. Don't shout on an already crowded stage. And I have ended up connecting with a lot of people, including a chap who's very involved with some work around looking at the education system and why it isn't working. And he's invited me to come in and contribute to a study they're doing, and some hopefully some new ideas and thoughts around that. And it was interesting, so when I was talking to him, two things. Number one, I was like, what he's talking about sounds like the heart of God. And I waited about a week before I was like, can I just ask you other faith? And he does. So that makes a lot of sense. But also I found myself wanting to discount myself and say, well, actually, you know, there's lots more experts in this field. Go onto the website, Education UK website. But instead, I found myself saying about all the other experience I have in corporate and with youth and other things, that actually means that my perspective and my approach is quite different, and it's looking at leadership of schools as well as that of children. And so that's been amazing. And the piece that I wrote with the support of these guys that are joining me was just phenomenal. And it's landed really, really well. And actually today it's gone out as an example of, this is the caliber of contributions we need for this. So that's amazing. I've collaborated with these guys, so Ollie and Marie, who we're looking at this project for sixth formers for independent schools, which is going really well. And then there's sort of various other emerging things going around. So yeah, it's gone from kind of just this small thing, 10.5 a week, doing a few bits in schools, to actually real influence. And that's what I prayed early on in lockdown, listening to quite a lot of stuff around mindset and, you know, the predisposition to sort of survive. And I actually wrote a question up on my board saying, is it possible to raise a generation that predisposed to succeed and thrive? And I wrote under that, government influence, Gavin Williamson. I was like, not because I feel like, you know, I have something more special than other people to say, but because this stuff is too important to just front feed. It's like, I want to see change. I want to be a part of that. So, and it's happening, but it's not happening because I've suddenly found a new skill set. It's happening because I've emptied myself. I'm letting God move through me. And he is so interested in people and their hearts. So,
how can people join you in that movement? Where can they find you?
So I have a MITOS.work Instagram page, which I'm beginning to build momentum on. My website, www.mitos.work. I'm on LinkedIn. There's a MITOS.work page on LinkedIn. I love collaborating. I love talking to people about this. And I'm not interested in being the main voice. It's about team. It's about joining hearts with one another. And I think that's one thing that I recently, through sort of an activity, an exercise I did with these guys, you know, we had to sort of find our words, and mine kept coming back as connecting and connected. And connected, being connected is so important to me. And actually, I love connecting people. So I sort of think, oh, that person would be really good for this person, and releasing them to go and do it. That brings me a lot of joy as well. So
good.
Yeah.
I'd love to know what the phrase "always better than yesterday" means to you.
I knew that was coming. It comes back to forgiveness, always. So I know that so long as I keep forgiving and keep making room, that allows growth and change and capacity to increase, which enables me to be better in myself, but also better for other people.
Love that. Thank you for taking time out of your day. Thank you for sharing your heart and your mind. And I'd just love for you to share or leave us with a final thought from your good self.
Final thought. I think for absolutely everybody listening, you're doing better than you think you are.
Let's leave it at that. Thank you so much for your time. Much love.